Hey, Mike, say hi.
Hi.
Do it again.
Hi. Oh, wait a minute.
It's a weird-
I know this trick. Yodeling. Oh, that's awesome. That's the best.
So I wanted to make a song. This is not very lyrical.
Say to the sun, do it again. Say to the moon, do it again. Monotony, monotony, we exalt in monotony. You got the eternal appetite of infancy. Exalt in monotony.
Today's theme is going to be exulting monotony.
That is fantastic.
See how much you can go over and over and over again on the same thing. For instance, yodeling.
Say to the stars, do it again. Say to the babe, do it again. Monotony, monotony, we exalt in monotony. You've got the eternal appetite of infancy. Exalt in monotony.
You're listening to another episode of Chesterton's Gateway with Ethan Nicolle and Michael Grumbine. An exceedingly annoying episode. Good heavens, please, make it stop.
Say to the hermit crab, do it again. Say to
It gets
the
more bizarre as it
elephants,
goes.
monotony, monotony, we exalt in monotony. We've got the eternal appetite of infancy. Exalt in monotony. Say to the male seahorse, do it again. Say to the dolphin, do it again. Monotony, monotony, exalt in monotony. We've got the eternal appetite of infancy. Exalt in monotony.
Part 4. This is our first five-parter.
Say to the tarantula wasp, do it again. Say
And if
to
anyone
the
gets tired of this song,
it's
your weakness. It's not because the song is monotonous.
Right. So the funny thing is, I learned putting that song together on AI is that the whole song is like 6 or 7 minutes long because I maxed out the amount of lyrics you could do, and it's just it's very repetitive, monotonous. Only the exult or the say to the thing, do it again. It gets more and more bizarre.
Okay.
And then, but then the thing is, I didn't put this in the. I mean, I did tell it to be monotonous and to keep repeating and to yodel a lot and like. But the song gets more and more insane as it almost just breaks down and becomes like nightmare fuel by the end of it.
Really?
So everybody wants to hear the whole thing. We'll hear more towards the end of the show, but if you really want to hear the full thing, it'll be on Chesterton's Gateway as a band. If you look up the band, when you look up search Chesterton's Gateway on an audio, like on Spotify, you get the audiobook for my book, you get the band, and you get the podcast. So make sure you pick the right one. All right, we're here, part 4. We're getting ready for the big finale next week with Dale Ahlquist, but this is a special episode because we're going through, I think, for a lot of people, one of their favorite Chesterton quotes of all time today.
Yep. And going back, we'll be going backwards with him, right? It'll be part 3.
No, it'll be part 5. We did part 3 with Christopher Ouellet.
Right. You're right. Yeah, the final. Yep. Sorry.
Yep.
We do a lot of episodes
Dale
and
Ahlquist.
we get these cool guests. I like the guests. Hopefully we'll get some more.
And hopefully it works so we don't have to use Zoom again.
Yeah, the big dog, though, next week with Dale Ahlquist. He's probably one of the most learned men about Chesterton and living on this earth right now.
Yeah.
Guy knows more about Chesterton than I've...
I mean, that's his job. He just learns about Chesterton all day long.
Exactly. He's probably...
I was fascinated, though. I asked him when I met him the first time, or second maybe. I asked him if he had ever, because has he read all of Chesterton that is available? And he said, I've probably read the most of all people, but no, I have not. I've not read all of it. Even the president of the Chesterton Society.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
But this is the fun one. This is this is one of the parts of the fun one. Obviously, as everyone knows, this chapter is one of our favorites, if not the favorite of Orthodoxy. And this section has probably one of the more famous Chesterton quotes from Orthodoxy.
This will stick with you if you haven't heard it before, or if you have no soul. If you have no soul, it might not. But if you have a soul, it's going to stick with you. So here we go. We're starting.
Here we go.
Well, I left the fairy tales lying on the floor of the nursery, and I have not found any book so sensible since. I left the nurse guardian of tradition and democracy, and I have not found any modern type so sanely radical or so sanely conservative. But the matter for important comment was here, that when I first went out into the mental atmosphere of the modern world, I found that the modern world was positively opposed on 2 points to my nurse and to the nursery tales. It has taken me a long time to find out that the modern world is wrong and my nurse was right. The really curious thing was this, that modern thought contradicted this basic creed of my boyhood on its 2 most essential doctrines. I have explained that the fairy tales founded in me 2 convictions. First, that this world is a wild and startling place, which might have been quite different, but which is quite delightful. Second, that before this wildness and delight, one may well be modest and submit to the queerest limitations of so queer a kindness. But I found the whole modern world running like a high tide against both my tendernesses. And the shock of that collision created 2 sudden and spontaneous sentiments, which I have had ever since, and which, crude as they were, have since hardened into convictions.
All right. Can you help me grasp? Can you dumb down what he just said as far as his 2 main points? Because he kind of reviews right there.
Right.
The first one is the world is a startling. What is it? The world is a wild and startling place, which might have been quite different. So that's the sort of the Elfland aspect. That part I get. The next part, which I know we talked about last time, but the way he words it here, I get a little bit lost on it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's about the doctrine of conditional joy, right?
Yes. The first one. The second one is.
The second
I
one.
mean, they're kind of both together, but right. So just to remind everyone, in case you haven't listened to the last episode really recently, what he's talking about, the doctrine of conditional joy, is that the world is wild and wonderful, full of magic, and but but because of that, we should stand in a position to it where we expect it to have mysterious laws and boundaries and rules, like like the like this law that Cinderella has to come back at midnight, or that Beauty has to fall in love with the Beast before the last petal falls from the rose. And these are laws that don't necessarily make sense to us, but that's okay. That every child who reads, I mean, I've never actually had a child, myself, any of my children, or anyone else I've heard of, question, for example, why Cinderella has to return by midnight. Children seem to kind of natively understand that there should be this kind of boundary to this kind of the kinds of treasures that the treasures of wonder that the world offers to you and that creation offers to you, and that magic exists for. So those are his 2 laws. One is that the world is wild and wonderful, and we should be continually delighted by it. And the next is that those wild wonders and delights should have a law, should have boundaries to them, even if we don't understand the rules.
Before this wildness and delight, one may well be modest and submit to the queerest limitations of so queer kindness.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that, I mean, like, just being totally honest here, like, the first one I fully get, the second one I personally get, but I don't get as much, like, it's not as solid of a point to me. I get a little lost on that one. Like, how is that? Almost the way he says a chicken doesn't imply an egg. How does this wild world imply mysterious laws?
Well, that's the chicken and the egg problem is the heart of it. It's that we don't know the connections between chicken and eggs. We can see that one follows the other, but we don't
Right.
we don't know why. And so because we don't know why, in humility, you ought to back away and say, okay, I don't know why. So there's some rules and laws going on here. There's some things with regard to chickens and eggs that I need to respect, and I don't understand them.
So the laws aren't being inferred. We're just learning. We're realizing that there are laws. There is a natural law. Is that kind of what he's saying? He's getting at is that there's a
yes, yeah, there are
there's a right and wrong. There's a basic right
yeah,
and
he
wrong.
is going to connect it to natural law. Right now, it's just the law of magic or the fairy or the one of the fairy tale.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's he's just recapping for us. Now, what he's going to do is he's going to say, by the way, then I grew up and I found that modern modernity denied both of these laws, and he's going to explain how.
All right, on to the second paragraph here. Here we go.
First, I found the whole modern world talking scientific fatalism, saying that everything is as it must always have been, being unfolded without fault from the beginning. The leaf on the tree is green because it could never have been anything else. Now, the fairy tale philosopher is glad that the leaf is green precisely because it might have been scarlet. He feels as if it had turned green an instant before he looked at it. He is pleased that snow is white on the strictly reasonable ground that it might have been black. Every colour has in it a bold quality as of choice. The red of garden roses is not only decisive but dramatic, like suddenly spilt blood. He feels that something has been done. But the great determinists of the 19th century were strongly against this native feeling that something had happened an instant before. In fact, according to them, nothing ever really had happened since the beginning of the world. Nothing ever had happened since existence had happened. And even about the date of that, they were not very sure.
So we're like talking like Big Bang Theory or something here?
Yeah, that's so he's talking about this is the rise of the evolutionary biologist of whom he said much in times past. But he's pointing out that instead of thinking of the world as something that you've come upon and it may have just happened, that there's action, there's action and things being done, they feel that everything was inevitable. It's just there's nothing being done. It's like a landslide. It's just a thing. Things are falling because of gravity, and that's the way it works. And there's no action aside from like the unthinking force of the earth upon the rocks, and that's it.
Yeah.
So Chesterton's going to talk more about this, but essentially, what's I find really interesting about this paragraph is he's teasing out. I love his examples of color because those are they are kind of potent. But what he's teasing out is after he talks about color. He says this is the excuse me, the fairy tale philosopher. It feels like something has been done, so an action has been taken. So this is a key concept which he doesn't really say explicitly, but it involves everything in fairy. In fairyland, in elfland, things are the way they are because it's been done. Someone has made a choice. There's an actor or an agent, and an action has been taken. And he's intimating here that that's the kind of intuitive sense we have. That when all of a sudden, when a child turns a corner and then sees a park or a garden right in front of them, and they light up as if, oh my goodness, not like I do. Like if I turn the corner and there's a nice park there with some nice flowers that I've never seen before, my mind immediately goes, oh, I wasn't aware that this thing was here. But they just are lit up as if the flowers have just sprung up in front of them. And this is Chesterton's attitude. There's an implied understanding with Elfland that things have just happened, that they have been done on purpose for you in a way. It's a kind of a personal view of the universe, which implies a doer and things done, and then other doers and other things done, and then you're another doer and you can do things. And so he has a very personal philosophy, and that's one of the underlying factors that he doesn't really say explicitly here, but he's going to go a little more into it. Now he's contrasting that with the evolutionary biologists, and they're like, no one ever does anything. It's just all a bunch of random chemical reactions that were inevitable, and so like it's not like anyone makes no choices here. Just and he's about to throw Calvinists under the bus, as is his wont as well. So,
all right, let's do it. Sorry, Calvinists.
The modern world, as I found it, was solid for modern Calvinism, for the necessity of things being as they are. But when I came to ask them, I found they had really no proof of this unavoidable repetition in things. except the fact that the things were repeated. Now, the mere repetition made the things to me rather more weird than more rational. It was as if, having seen a curiously shaped nose in the street and dismissed it as an accident, I had then seen 6 other noses of the same astonishing shape. I should have fancied for a moment that it must be some local secret society. So one elephant having a trunk was odd, but all elephants having trunks looked like a plot. I speak here only of an emotion, and of an emotion at once stubborn and subtle. But the repetition in nature seemed sometimes to be an excited repetition, like that of an angry schoolmaster saying the same thing over and over again. The grass seemed signalling to me with all its fingers at once. The crowded stars seemed bent upon being understood. The sun would make me see him if he rose 1,000 times. The recurrences of the universe rose to the maddening rhythm of an incantation. And I began to see an idea.
Oh, what did he begin to see?
So I really love this paragraph. So to me, this paragraph kind of flipped my mind on Chesterton with regard to this chapter, because when he's reading the first part and he's saying that the necessity of things being as they are, but when I came to ask them, these are the modern Calvinists or the evolutionary biologists, I found they really had no proof of this unavoidable repetition in things except the fact that things were repeated. So they had concluded because things repeat, they must always repeat, and there's no choice in that.
Right.
Now, the mere repetition made the things to be me rather more weird than more rational. And this was a kind of a moment flip, because I realized when I first, or second, I'll have to admit, it wasn't the first time I read it. It's the second time I read it. Second time I read it, I realized, oh my gosh, I have just assumed that as well. It's been beaten into me through science classes throughout my youth that if you see a pattern in things and things always act a certain way, when you put one chemical with another chemical and it does a third thing, it has a reaction. Or I've seen the sun come up in the morning and go down in the same place at night, and then slowly shift over the seasons to slightly different places on the horizon. That's because those things are, inevitable. It's a pattern, and therefore it must be kind of cold and unthinking and dead. And he's pointing out, actually, if you think about it, it's kind of weird that things do the same thing. You don't get things doing the same thing over and over again, just as a product of random chance. He's pointing out randomness, like you walk down the street and you see
Isn't that what random is?
100 different noses. Each one of them is random. But if, for example, you saw a very peculiar nose, and then a minute later, you saw the same type of nose on a different person, and then you saw 4 more instances in the next 10 minutes on your walk of the same type of nose you wouldn't think, oh, that was a weird random chance. You would think, wait a minute, there's people of the same type there's something else going on here.
Something going on here. Yeah.
In other words, we actually do intuitively understand that repetition actually means there's some plot. There's something going on. There's something more than just randomness. And for me, I was like, because I realized that this was something that I'd always presumed about, and it was given to me my presumption was brought to me by 12 years of school science, which taught me that that's exactly the way things are. And he's just exploding that whole myth.
Yeah, you didn't think about how contradictory that whole idea is, that the randomness of the universe somehow gave way to all these patterns. A thing that is by definition has no patterns, somehow gave birth to all. The smallest, most simple pattern makes no sense in.
Exactly.
I never connected that.
and that's even true of our machines that we make. Like if you turn on a dryer, you put the same load of clothes in, and you turn on a dryer, and it dries for exactly the same amount of time, 45 or 50 minutes, and then you stop the dryer and the clothes all fall. If every time you did that, those 20 pieces of clothing fell in exactly the same spot each time, you would actually not think of that as, oh, there's some law of physics going on.
You'd call The Exorcist.
Yeah. Exactly. You'd be like, something's wrong here. This repetition is not natural. It should be much more chaotic and random than this. Randomness is what's caused. If all you have is just blunt patterns and immaterial forces and no will or volition, then you get randomness. You don't get patterns.
Yeah, and the world we live in, the amount of patterns and repetition is staggering. It's incomprehensible.
Exactly. And
that all is birthed out of randomness really makes no sense.
Yep. And we realize it makes no sense when we start thinking about it. But I think there's another principle at work too, which is like the familiarity breeds contempt, where we see so much pattern, and we also
we take it for granted.
We can't see the doer with our eyes most of the time. So we just start presuming there is no doer and there is no, but it's, and we get too familiar with the patterns. But Chesterton has that gift of looking at things with fresh eyes.
Okay, here comes a great big paragraph. You ready?
Awesome. Let's do it.
Beefy. I didn't break it up, so we're going big.
All right.
All the towering materialism which dominates the modern mind rests ultimately upon one assumption, a false assumption. It is supposed that if a thing goes on repeating itself, it is probably dead, a piece of clockwork. People feel that if the universe was personal, it would vary. If the sun were alive, it would dance. This is a fallacy even in relation to known fact, for the variation in human affairs is generally brought into them, not by life, but by death, by the dying down or breaking off of their strength or desire. A man varies his movements because of some slight element of failure or fatigue. He gets into an omnibus because he is tired of walking, or he walks because he is tired of sitting still. But if his life and joy were so gigantic that he never tired of going to Islington, he might go to Islington as regularly as the Thames goes to Sheerness. The very speed and ecstasy of his life would have the stillness of death. The sun rises every morning. I do not rise every morning, but the variation is due not to my activity, but to my inaction. Now, to put the matter in a popular phrase, it might be true that the sun rises regularly because he never gets tired of rising. His routine might be due not to a lifelessness, but to a rush of life. The thing I mean can be seen, for instance, in children when they find some game or joke that they specially enjoy. A child kicks his legs rhythmically through excess, not absence of life. Because children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free, therefore they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, "Do it again." And the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony, but perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, "Do it again" to the sun, and every evening, "Do it again" to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but has never got tired of making them. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy, for we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we. The repetition in nature may not be a mere recurrence. It may be a theatrical encore. Heaven may encore the bird who laid an egg. If the human being conceives and brings forth a human child, instead of bringing forth a fish or a bat or a griffin, the reason may not be that we're fixed in an animal fate without life or purpose. It may be that our little tragedy has touched the gods, that they admire it from their starry galleries, and that at the end of every human drama man is called again and again before the curtain. Repetition may go on for millions of years by mere choice, and at any instant it may stop. Man may stand on the earth generation after generation, and yet each birth be his positively last appearance.
There you have it. If you've never heard that before, you might want to go back and listen to it one more time. I just wanted to get it all in one, but
yeah, it's love. I love it.
It's beautiful, and yet also, I found it kind of like it really helps you clearly see. I don't know, helps you. I don't know. It really paints a picture of our sin, like our fallenness. Like I feel like when
Yes,
I look,
that's what I found. Like the line that captures everyone's attention, or most people's attention anyway, is to do it
mm,
again to the sun and do it again to the moon. But I
yeah,
loved
and
the,
you know
the,
it's
the
true when you hear it.
yes, yes. I love though the sentence that is, it may be that he, that's God, capital He, has the eternal appetite of infancy, for we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we.
Right.
That's a beautiful line. I just like
Yeah, because I think any person can look at you look back at a child, or I think that's one of the great effects I think having a child has upon you, which I think
Mhm.
and when people act like, oh, it's just a matter of taste whether you have a kid or not, I kind of disagree. I think that having a kid is one of the most profound experiences you can have on this earth, if not the
Yes,
most, as far as
exactly.
human relationships goes. And to just skip out on that, I don't know. But seeing them experience this world through those new eyes. I remember my daughter would sit on my lap at night and she would kind of come awake after, drinking from the bottle for a while. And there was a curtain hook above us that, you know, was like it just held the curtain, just a lame old curtain hook. Who cares? All she could think about, all she wanted was to reach up and get it. She really is just so fascinated by that curtain hook. She just loved it. She was so obsessed with it.
Yep,
And I was thinking of Chesterton. I was like, maybe the curtain hook really is as exciting. And you kind of go like, you know, why isn't it? It's infinitely amazing when you go down to the molecular level of what this whole life is and how why are those molecules holding together unlike the other ones, and the fact that I get to have a curtain and you can go down a whole path of how amazing the curtain hook is and like why not?
exactly.
And it really is me who's just deadened myself to even thinking about how amazing the world is around me, partially just because I can't manage to walk around being shocked all the time. But like, so then the other thing, so what happened after that is my daughter,
And why can't you? Why can't you manage to walk around being shocked all the time? Because Chesterton says that in the beginning. He says the reason we can't do the same thing over and over is because there's a death in us. Like
right?
there's a weakness in us that yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry,
Well,
you were saying
we're trying to accomplish something, right? We're thinking, oh, we can't just spend all our time gawking at the flowers or whatever. But my
um
daughter reaches up and s- uh, so she had two fascinations. I can't remember the order this happened. It was around the time I was having this thought about the curtain hook, and then all of a sudden she puts her hand in my beard and she looks. She gets this look in her eyes of amazement.
does she clench the
Yeah,
fist? Yeah. Yeah.
but like also just like she can't stop playing with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
it
good.
kind of said to me like, yeah, the same God that made that curtain hook, you know, besides the company that made it, but like this reality, like
Mhm.
I am part of that. He made me, and
Yep. And the beard.
is unfathomably wonderful and wondrous. Anything in this world is. It's easy to forget. You are. I am.
Yes.
God made us that way.
He did, and, it really makes sense when you look at something like Mark in in a number of gospels, they have quotes from Christ about children, but I
Hmm.
like the one where Mark says, "Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it."
Hmm.
In Mark 10, and, you that's so true. Chesterton is tapping right into that. He's showing us that the child's attitude towards the kingdom of God and the world of God's created is so much truer to the creation than our old. We have sinned and grown old, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I love this passage. I love this passage, and
Yeah.
just the image of God saying to the Son every day, "Do it again, do it
Yep.
again," just over and over again,
Yeah.
and so yeah, just that lesson about
And
repetition.
the fact that that strikes you is beautiful. Like it's not. You don't go, oh, that takes a real idiot to really love watching the sun come up and up again. Like you wish you had that.
I do,
You're almost envious of it, like to
do.
have that much joy in a thing that happens over and over again.
We can, but things like this, we can renew ourselves. I mean, this is
Yeah,
the thing. We aren't dead, inevitably. We can return, give a life back to, there can be a renewal. And that's one of the things that I find that Chesterton's work is so good for sometimes, because
yeah,
he has that sense of wonder and love to have it renewed when I read him.
yeah. All right, shall we continue on?
Let's do it.
This was my first conviction, made by the shock of my childish emotions meeting the modern creed in mid-career. I had always vaguely felt facts to be miracles in the sense that they are wonderful. Now I began to think them miracles in the stricter sense that they were willful. I mean that they were, or might be, repeated exercises of some will. In short, I had always believed that the world involved magic. Now I thought that perhaps it involved a magician. And this pointed a profound emotion always present and subconscious, that this world of ours has some purpose, and if there is a purpose, there is a person. I had always felt life first as a story, and if there is a story, there is a storyteller.
Really going big on that last
AI
line.
Chesterton's getting into it. Yeah. And this is obviously the deep connection that once you get to the point where you see repetition as a thing that only happens when there's a pattern that is done, then there must be a doer. There must be someone doing it. And so if there's, it's kind of self-explanatory, this one. I mean, this
is like a standard William Lane Craig, like C.S. Lewis, if there is a law, there's a lawgiver. There's a move. There's the great mover. There's one that I say.
It's the first mover.
Weird.
Yeah, if all these things are in motion and these other things moved them and something else moved them, then there has to be a first mover that wasn't moved, that moved everything else. Yeah, right. Yeah. Classic Thomas Aquinas argument that's now
Coco.
But what I love about Chesterton is he comes to that same place, but from the sentiments from childhood. He comes to that same place.
Yeah, we got here a totally different way.
Yep. Exactly. He got there from the wonder of the world and the wonder of repetition. And Aquinas got there in a different way.
Yeah.
William Lane Craig gets there in a different way. But they come to the same conclusion.
Well, they often start with it. And that's one thing that's often kind of the basic starting. Well, if you're going to bring in all these laws of the natural law, then who is the lawgiver? That's kind of the beginning of any debate. I love that Chesterton spends all this time before he even gets to that and kind of builds this foundation of wonder and appreciation for what we actually live in, what this world is, and the fact that randomness doesn't lead to patterns. It doesn't make sense, and just kind of knocks all those things out, goes all around it first. Then he goes to he hits that argument.
Yeah, I find this more convincing than the natural law lawgiver. I do think the natural law lawgiver argument works, but here's what I mean by that. I know people that when they hear that argument, they'll be, all right, fine. There's no natural law then. I deny that. It's just custom that people make up and we just happen to believe it ourselves. That is a lot easier to say than for where Chesterton starts, because where Chesterton starts is you don't know the connection between the things in the world. You don't understand how a flower comes about and not a tiger from a tree. You don't understand how a chicken comes from an egg. Go ahead and tell me you understand, because you don't. And that's harder to deny. And then also the instinct that he just talked about, or when you see a bunch of repetition in a row and you think about it, and it happens this exact same way every time, there's something else going on there. It's not random chance. In fact, like you said, like if the 20 pieces of clothing fall exactly the same pattern each time, you call an exorcist because something else is going on there. You know that there's some kind of will there. And that's more intuitive, I think, and people have a harder time denying that if they're really be honest. All right, so on to the second tradition, the one about law. Now, this one's a little hazier. It hits a little less directly. But
this one's not on any coffee mugs on Chesterton.
No. I do want a coffee mug that says "Do it again" with a picture of the sun behind it. That would be pretty awesome.
It probably exists.
We should do that for merch. We should get some merch. Do it again.
All right, here we go.
But modern thought also hit my second human tradition. It went against the fairy feeling about strict limits and conditions. The one thing it loved to talk about was expansion and largeness. Herbert Spencer would have been greatly annoyed if anyone had called him an imperialist, and therefore it is highly regrettable that nobody did. But he was an imperialist of the lowest type. He popularized this contemptible notion that the size of the solar system ought to overawe the spiritual dogma of man. Why should a man surrender his dignity to the solar system any more than to a whale? If mere size proves that man is not the image of God, then a whale may be the image of God, a somewhat formless image, what one might call an impressionist portrait. It is quite futile to argue that man is small compared to the cosmos, for man was always small compared to the nearest tree.
Yeah.
But Herbert Spencer, in his headlong imperialism, would insist that we had in some way been conquered and annexed by the astronomical universe. He spoke about men and their ideals exactly as the most insolent unionist talks about the Irish and their ideals. He turned mankind into a small nationality, and his evil influence can be seen even in the most spirited and honourable of later scientific authors, notably in the early romances of Mr. H.G. Wells. Many moralists have in an exaggerated way represented the earth as wicked, but Mr. Wells and his school made the heavens wicked. We should lift up our eyes to the stars from whence would come our ruin.
Right, a lot of references there.
And I don't get how the imperialism thing ties into any of that.
Okay, so this is a tradition where imperialism was kind of like a dirty word at that point. Remember, this is 1908, so the Germans are ramping up for World War I, and they have established an imperialist state in Europe, and they are very, law of conquest, all must follow the same rule, very imperial will, the Kaiser has spoken, therefore we must obey. And Herbert Spencer was a biologist. He was, in fact, the guy that coined the phrase survival of the fittest. So Darwin didn't ever say survival of the fittest. That's a thing we think of from Darwinism, but it was actually Spencer that coined that phrase after reading Darwin. And Spencer thought of himself as a kind of enlightened humanist, and he was expanding the world of science and freeing up men to have greater thoughts. And he attacked religion a lot. And his point was, so he would have been hated to be called an imperialist because his claim would have been, no, I'm a scientist. I'm freeing men's thoughts from the rigor of things like tyrannical imperialism. But Chesterton's arguing you are diminishing man's dignity and the ideals that we hold by proposing that we ought to just be in awe of the universe just because it's so vast. Now, we can kind of understand this, like Carl Sagan was big on this in our day. When I was a kid, he was like this astronomer that was on TV shows, and he would talk about how there are billions and billions of stars, and he would wax on about the size of the universe and how puny we are in size. But Chesterton calls it out of me, he's like, that's not what's best about us. Is our size. So what if there's bigger things than us? Everything's bigger than us. Trees are bigger than us. Everything dwarfs us. So just because a thing is big doesn't mean that it's expansive, doesn't mean that we should then remove our moral restrictions, our laws, our ideas about our dignity in God, our boundaries that we've set for ourselves, which is what Spencer would have loved. Spencer and his ilk would have loved people to cast off the shackles of moral, especially religious-based moral thinking, and embrace this expansive, ultimately fairly deterministic, materialistic science. So Chesterton's, kicking him to the curb. And then he brings up H.G. Wells, because he's pointed out, he does this it's a great Chesterton thing. Like Spencer's talking about the vastness of the universe and the solar system and the world, and how we should be in awe of it. And then Chesterton points out, and then you have Wells, who comes in. Now he says early romances. That's just an old word. They didn't have the word science fiction back then. They didn't. So a romance was just any fiction novel that evoked strong passions. So most fiction literature was called a romance.
Okay.
So it's not about people kissing. It's about, a romance was just about like Treasure Island was a romance.
An adventure,
yeah, any adventure story. So Chesterton points out that H.G. Wells does the opposite, and while Spencer goes to the stars and says, "Look at the great expanses, we should be in awe of this," H.G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds in 1895, and he said, "From the stars will come your destruction. The aliens are coming." He also wrote The First Man in the Moon before this book, before Chesterton wrote Orthodoxy. First Man in the Moon.
So the heavens wicked just means aliens attacking.
Yeah, it means like the first guys go to the moon, discover it's already infested with a race of insectoid aliens, and like so H.G. Wells who's one of the first science fiction writers ever, was writing about how the man's doom was in the stars. So Chesterton is contrasting the overly sort of materialist a guy like Spencer with the with the guy that says, and by the way, that the hugeness and vastness of space is going to be our doom.
So, and he's saying at the beginning, this is a reaction to it's going against the feeling about strict limits and conditions. So the doctrine of conditional joy, it's saying, how does it? Because that's lost in how that is a response to this is it's not necessarily a response, but instead of that, this is their view.
Yeah,
it's so big we can't be significant. Is that kind of
yes, yeah, exactly. But one step further. Not only can't we be significant, but all of our ideas about what's important are unimportant. So when we say "Thou shalt not murder," when we have these rules, these boundaries on our moral actions, when we say all kinds of things about what we ought to do, when we start bringing in the oughts of the moral laws, because remember that's the parallel. Chesterton doesn't actually believe that there's anything in the real world about returning with your pumpkin carriage at midnight. He's saying that story taught him that the real world has these sometimes arbitrary seeming rules, but they are for the good of the people in the world, and we don't understand them, but we need to accept them. And so we should be respectful of those mysterious laws about how we ought to act. Because remember, all the laws of fairy, Elfland, are always about what you ought to do or not do. Because Elfland's all about doing. It's not about inevitable, progression of chemicals. It's about people doing things, agents doing things. And so what are those laws? What are the laws about doing in our modern society? You shouldn't take people's property. You ought to respect a woman when she's given birth. You ought to, there's 1,000 of these rules and what's kind of arbitrary seeming expectations that we have. And the Spencers and the Wells of the time wanted to forget those and explode those and say, forget about that. Look there's this universe out there. It makes all of our laws look really tiny and pathetic. So we should just ignore all of our laws. They all come from superstition anyway. So let's just move on without those. So I think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah. All right.
Is this the final paragraph?
Chapter for this time? Here we go.
But the expansion of which I speak was much more evil than all this. I have remarked that the materialist, like the madman, is in prison, in the prison of one thought.
Yeah.
These people seem to think it singularly inspiring to keep on saying that the prison was very large. The size of this scientific universe gave one no novelty, no relief. The cosmos went on forever, but not in its wildest constellation could there be anything really interesting. Anything. For instance, such as forgiveness or free will. The grandeur or infinity of the secret of its cosmos added nothing to it. It was like telling a prisoner in Reading jail that he would be glad to hear that the jail now covered half the county. The warder would have nothing to show the man, except more and more long corridors of stone, lit by ghastly lights, and empty of all that is human. So these expanders of the universe had nothing to show us except more and more infinite corridors of space, lit by ghastly suns, and empty of all that is divine.
That really reminds me of Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's always one or the other. He's always like, "Oh, the amazing Earth and the amazing stars and the vastness of the galaxy," and then he's going on about how this earth does not care about you or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's unthinking,
like
unfeeling, uncaring.
Unfeeling, uncaring. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember him saying, like in one of the specials, "Oh, isn't it wonderful how we're all made of stardust?" I'm like, stardust? Like, who cares? Stardust is cold and boring.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be hot and
dust,
boring,
right?
but it's just dust.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, exactly. And so, like, that's what's so interesting. And he taps into something I've long felt as a science fiction fan. When I put myself and I imagine going between and galaxies, say in a spacecraft of some kind. If you imagine if we invent technology where we could actually go through the universe, and there would be vast amounts of time where it would just be cold and lonely. There's just nothing different. It's just the same stuff over and over again. And it's spectacular in a certain material way, but as Chesterton might say, it's not anything really interesting, like, for example, forgiveness or free will. These are way more interesting because they're about a divine creature, which is us, created in God's image and likeness. And so, yeah, he's just completely dismissing his they've made the prison large. I love how he ties back to the maniac in this one. Like, now the people that are denying Elfland are the maniacs. And so the more ethics of Elfland are the maniacs. So anyway.
Totally. All right, well, next week we're bringing Dale Alquist here, and he's gonna put it all together. He's gonna bring it home.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
Nope. Now dance.
I love the yodeling. AI is really good at yodeling.
It is good.
Say to the strangler,
Harmonized yodeling.
do it again. Say to the exploding toads, do it again.
Oh no.
Monotony, resulting monotony. You've got an appetite of infancy.
Exploding toads, apparently a real thing.
Exploding toads.
I found like all the weirdest things of nature, and he's just like, do it again.
So you didn't actually tell it exploding toads?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I still wrote the lyrics, but they're super redundant. They just keep
Say
changing.
to the strangler figs, do it again.
Strangler figs.
Say to the exploding toads.
Oh, they repeated it though. That's not supposed to repeat that.
Monotony, exalted.
It gets crazier.
What do you mean it's not supposed to do that? It's monotony.
Yeah.
Chesterton's Gateway is produced by Ethan Nicolle and Michael Grumbine. It is based on the book of the same name, which can be found on that capitalist monstrosity Amazon.com. Send questions and comments to Chesterton's Gateway at gmail.com. And join us on Patreon, where only the true Chestertonians can be found. Goodbye.
He's starting to fall apart here, see? Starting to lose his mind, see? Like we got the monomaniac here. It's like yodeling is the entire world.
You just put the singer in a blender.
Look at that. This is losing his mind. All right, everybody. And believe it or not, there's still there's still like a full minute left of the song. All right, Mike. Bye, everybody. Don't have nightmares.
Holy mackerel.